Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Young, thank you for being with us today. This budget proposes about close to $5 trillion in new taxes. Am I in the ballpark, Director Young?
4.7, so
4.7 in new taxes. It would be $65 trillion in total taxes over the next 10-year period, which would be record high taxes ever proposed. Agree?
I mentioned some Clinton statistics on percent of GDP, so we'd be in line with where we were in the 90s on percent of GDP.
19.6% of
Correct.
GDP is record high. Mr. Chairman, the Tax Foundation released their analysis of the president's tax proposals this morning. Just very briefly, they find these tax hikes would be devastating for the American people. The burden of higher taxes hits middle-income families, once again breaking Biden's promise. It would cost 335,000 jobs, would reduce wages, and would reduce GDP by 1.3%, which would increase the deficit even beyond what is being proposed here. So, Mr. Chairman, again, this is by the Tax Foundation released just this morning, the details and analysis of President Biden's fiscal year 2024 budget proposal. Would like to insert that into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
And I'd like to then get back to just a few comments that you made during your open comments. The deficits in particular. Are you concerned with the level of debt that we have now and with the projection going forward?
Yes, that's why you've seen our policies that would bring down the deficit by nearly $3 trillion over 10 years.
Yeah, and this is what I would like to get to. And I asked Secretary Yellen these questions as well, because I can't for the life of me see where you are decreasing the deficit. And I don't think anyone outside of the Beltway looking at these numbers can see that as well. Would agree that you're reducing the deficit. And I think it's important that we, if we recognize that that is a goal, and we need to be transparent and understand what the numbers are. So I have in front of me your proposal from last fiscal year. You were proposing that the deficit at that point in 2023 would be 1.1 trillion. You agree with that number?
If you have last year's table in front of you, I'll agree with it.
1,154 billion. What was the actual deficit in 2023 in your new proposal?
So in 2023, our projected deficit will be,
1,569 billion.
yeah, so in 2023, deficit is projected to be 1.6 trillion.
1.6 trillion compared to 1.1 trillion, so it's half a trillion higher than what you were projecting 12 months ago.
I'll just remind you, we're still in the middle of 23, and those deficit numbers will change from this number and that number.
If anything,
They're
will
projections last year.
probably go up, if anything.
Absolutely not. We actually had lower deficits last year than our budget projected
It's-
in 22.
It's 40% higher than you were projecting last year at this time.
In 2022, our deficit projections were lower than the 1.7 trillion actually.
Let's look at one more year. Let's look at one more year. Last year at this time, you were projecting a deficit of 1.2 trillion for 2024. That's the upcoming year. What are you projecting in 2024 now?
1.8 trillion.
1.8 trillion. You think that's reducing the deficit?
So you are comparing projection to projection.
I am.
Interest rates have changed since then. Our economic projections have changed since then. Unemployment, and that all factors into
I am
the
comparing.
numbers.
I'm comparing what your plan was a year ago
Projections.
to your projections now. Correct. Last year at this time, you were projecting 14 trillion in total deficits over the next 10-year period. This year, you're projecting 17 trillion. That's 3 trillion more in deficits. Where are you seeing reductions in the deficit?
Our deficit numbers, the projection from this year to the budget year in 2033, 10-year budget in 24, I hope you see, if you pull out this year's table.
Sure, I have it right here.
show a cumulative deficit reduction of 2.9 trillion, then nearly 3 trillion.
Compared to what?
Compared to where we're starting in this fiscal year.
It's not true.
the end.
This fiscal year, the deficit is 1.5 trillion. What are you projecting in 10 years from now?
The cumulative deficit,
No, but
would
no,
be
you're projecting,
reduced
you're
to nearly
projecting,
3
you're
trillion.
projecting 2 trillion 10 years from now compared to 1.5 trillion.
That's not true.
Nowhere,
Deficits are year over year, so if you add the deficit reductions each year, the cumulative addition, we've done a lot of adding of spending over 10 years, so if we do the same for deficits, you add each of the savings, each year there are savings, the total is 2.9
the bottom line
trillion
is, the
at
bottom
end
line
of-
is,
at the
bottom
end of
line, claiming my
2033.
time here, the bottom line is, in 10 years, the deficit will be 2 trillion compared to 1.5 trillion now. We agree that it's important we reduce the deficits. It's really important that we look at these numbers, and the numbers you're looking at, there's no way anywhere anyone outside the Beltway would believe that we're reducing deficits. It's unfortunate
Those are our
that's the case.
estimates if the president's policies are adopted.
Gentleman's time is expired.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications so every time I put out a video, you can know about it. It'll come up in your feed. Hit that like button if you liked it. And be positive. Peace.